So after our interfaith prayer for peace and nonviolence yesterday, and on this sacred holy ground and in this space, we gathered yesterday. And so it is wonderful that we are back here in the Joan DeLorde's room in person, and that you make this place, this holy ground, a place of gift and grace for all. And we welcome all of you in person and also all those who are joining us virtually today. We welcome Lynn Levo to be one among us, a sister of St. Joseph from Albany Province, the Carondelet congregation, and a native New Yorker. Lynn is truly our sister. She is a licensed psychologist who integrates a life of prayer, her gifts and experience as a woman religious, and also as she consults with others of diversified organizations. Her focus is on the development of healthy relationships, personal and communal invitations to transformation, and invites hope for our world. Lynn, we warmly welcome you to be one among us, and we are grateful for your presence with us this afternoon. And so we begin this afternoon open to God's invitation, to the beckoning of this now moment, individually and communally and together. And so we pray.
O divine love, breathe new life into our beings. Enter our lives. Speak our names. Let the fire of your holy mystery be the sign of your transforming grace moving among us. Enable us to envision and create together so that our outpouring love will be made visible in the world, a world hungering for equality, healing, and hope. By our very lives and during this gathering, may we witness to your unifying spirit, creating and recreating opportunities so all may know your love and compassion. And to this we say amen.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you. Nice to be back. It's been a while. Uh, for most of us, we've been sort of been campused or beached, whatever word you want to say, about living in our own little spaces. So this is one of the first trips I've taken outside of Albany, just so you know. And I've been a flyer. I mean, I was flying 80,000 miles a year, so you can imagine. But it is as crazy as it is and was. It has also been graced truly, and although I would prefer face to face, I'm so grateful I could drive down today and be with you. At the same time, Zoom has provided us an opportunity, less than ideal, but an opportunity. So I am grateful. I think I'm on Zoom like 3-4 times a week, sometimes for days, So I'm really glad to be here. So thank you for the invitation and that beautiful short ride from Albany. It was gorgeous today. So thanks. And it's nice to be with you, with our sisters, with, I understand, some associates that are here joining us either in this room, and that there are friends and whatever. There's in the virtual world, we have no idea who's out there, but welcome to everybody. I'm glad to be here. I want to start with, by the way, the handouts are on the table, and you should just pick up the packet. And on the front should be the lace that is unfinished. So you want to pack it. Don't take one page. Take the whole little pile. And there should be on the top, we organized them in the order in which I'm going to use them. I'm not using PowerPoint. I thought it would be easier for you to have something in your hands and you can take them with you. And that's always an invitation to do more with them. So I want to start with the value of remembering and why remember and how could we not, given the significance of this weekend, 20 years after 9/11, and we're in the midst of an incredible pandemic that seems to be flaring once again. And at the same time, with all of its losses, and at the same time, we have collectively, as sisters and those of you connected to the congregation of the Great Love of God, a rich heritage. And so we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and our collective identity has been rooted in courage and sacrifice. And that is also what our call is today. As individual women and men, as members of the community, as associates, and all those who are listening, this is not a time for the faint of heart. It makes sense to me to begin our conversation by remembering just a little bit, because remembering helps us. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what remembering helps us to do. First of all, reflecting on our past allows us to understand where we were and make decisions about growing and becoming better. That's the invitation. We have an opportunity to grow and become better in whatever life form we're in. It can teach us lessons, how to use and apply to now and to this future that is evolving. It offers us an opportunity to grieve, a process that takes time, and we're in the midst of grieving many, many things. And finally, remembering our roots, because our roots are the foundation of our identity and points to what is authentic for us. Identity is rooted in knowing and remembering our origin. Identity and meaning are strengthened when we remember. And so you know better, those of you, I said on that little intro, I'm a native New Yorker. I'm not a New Yorker as in New York City, but I'm one of those upstate people. You know, we do belong, you know. And we even got some of the flood, believe it or not, you know, as crazy it is in Albany, you know, 100, 200 miles north. But, you know, the horror and the sorrow connected to the fall of those towers. Each of us has some experience of that. I had the privilege as a psychologist to come and work with people who got out of the towers for a week after, and, you know, and it was life-changing. I also think many of us are dealing with the losses connected to COVID. Loss of cherished loved ones. In 1 month, my province lost 10 sisters to COVID. 1 month. We weren't able to visit them. We weren't able to say goodbye. I think we lost connection with each other, the face-to-face, the touch, the bumping elbows, in the good way, you know, not the way we do it now because we're not touching too much. The loss of ritual, the loss of a way of life. That's true no matter you're a member of the congregation or not. We lost a lot. And from that event, the long ago one that is still in our mind and heart, and also from the COVID, we've learned a lot about what it means to be human and the significance of relationship, that we need each other, and together we can make a difference. Together we can make a difference. Not just the sisters with the sisters and the associates with the associates, but all of us together, we can make a difference. And so today I would really like to talk about being and being with. You didn't get the cover of this thing, but that was one of the subtitles, being and being with. And these are choices that relate to purpose and ultimately to transformation. So I want to thank Kathy McCluskey, who is another Boston CSJ, because she did a little history with us a long time ago, and I'm going to share that with you. And the sisters will certainly remember this, and the associates. And for those of you who are not sisters or associates, you can hear what you want to hear is the evolution of who we have come to be, and you have a personal evolution. Our community, this community of the great love of God, has evolved since our humble beginnings. The historic expressions of the CSSJ charism, of which many of you feel connected, are how we envisioned and responded to the calling of Jesus' dream for oneness and for all persons without distinction. Each manifestation of our history embodies greater complexity as we engaged a more complex world. And this evolutionary unfolding is moving us today more than ever before that we are called to we. We are called to we, not to I or to us, but to we, inviting greater relatedness, greater connection, and interdependence with one another, with the dear neighbor, and of course now with the earth, a much more consciousness of our connection with the earth. We've experienced moments of grace. That's that wonderful book by Ted Dunn that some of you are reading, or his article, Moments of Grace since 1650. Over the entire lifespan of this group of women. And today we are invited and challenged to go beyond and manifest the deeper understanding of Jesus, of what it means to be fully human, what it means to be one. And our first vocation for everybody in this room and for every person listening is to really be as fully functioning a human person as possible. And so, with that in mind, it means, and what does it mean then for the congregation of the great love of God and our charism of unifying love? Our founding sisters, those original, that small group, they worked with a specific set of insights. They lived in a small town in a very isolated circumstances. They knew their neighbors. They knew relationships were important, and that their participation in God's dream called them to witness to God's great love and embrace their neighbors in cordial charity. Those words that are in our documents. The community who refounded, not too much after that, after the French Revolution, saw a fractured country and a continent, Europe, trying to put itself back together. They understood the work of reconnecting, or we might use that word reconciliation. And they knew it was God's work that they were doing, and that their loving relationships and service helped to advance God's dream once again. Our foremothers, to each of our home communities, coming to the New World, framed their understanding of mission and of unifying love in still another way. They helped build a nation. They helped bring people together. They were teachers and spreaders of the faith, bringing education, healing, and development so that people might know themselves as sisters and brothers, as dear neighbors, beloved of God, and responsible for one another and for the well-being of society in a new land. They understood the power of community and brotherly and sisterly, neighborly love. They spent themselves in ministries to meet the needs of people and immigrants and building a faith community. That's our story as we get to this time, which brings us to today. Called to embrace our first vocation more than ever, being fully human, and living authentically our charism, calling us more and more than ever before to what does it mean to be unifying, loving women and men without distinction, and to the call to communion and care of the earth. That is our invitation at this point. So I'd like you to think just for a minute again, just hearing this evolution, and that's That's a good word to keep in mind. We have been evolving from the beginning, so why wouldn't we evolve now? Why wouldn't we continue the evolution? It's who we are. So for me, and I would invite you on your paper, it says there's a little antiphon there that we can pray together. If you would join me, Spirit of love, come give us the mind of Jesus. Teach us the wisdom of God. You probably have to turn your paper over, and we're in the middle of that page, I think. Everybody find where we are? Yeah. Okay. I gave you the consensus statement, and you'll know why in a minute, and you can look back there. I know that several of you, I've understood you, we've always been learners, this group here, None of us are pretty stagnant. So I understand that many of you have been reading or Ted Dunn's work on his book on Crossroads or his article that was, I believe, in occasional papers. Many of you have probably seen Joan Chittister's recent comments, and you may have read Sandra Schneider's talk in the Global Sisters report about is religious life dead? You've probably seen those, So in line with Ted's thinking about pathways, and he talks about pathways to change and transformation, I want to highlight purpose, personal purpose, and communal purpose as pathways. He offers other pathways, which are absolutely legitimate, and I would certainly encourage you to continue to think in those terms. I want to add to this personal and communal purpose as pathways because they focus on choices we have today. I think we can get caught in wondering what's it going to look like, how are we going to get there, and we get lost. What I'm encouraging us that we have choices we can make today, both personal choices and communal choices. And if we make those, we're going to be okay. We don't know what that looks like. That future for if you're a layman or woman, where that's all going to unfold in your life, you don't know all those pieces. And neither do we as sisters. So I want to talk about, in particular, I'll talk to the sisters, but it's true of every one of us. Why is this time so challenging? Why is it this appears to be more challenging than those other transitional moments? I think for me, one of the reasons is it's certainly complex, the time we live in, and it's everything happening around us, that even the pandemic, et cetera. I think the questions are complex. How we view the questions, we don't agree. It's complex. And finally, there are no easy answers. I also think for the sisters, and perhaps everyone, it is more challenging because it's not just about what we do, but who we are. So think about it. It's not whether we're going to do that ministry or we're going to continue in that school or whether we're doing, that's about doing. That is on the table. All of that is on the table. And who we are is on the table. And not only who we are, but who we are with one another and for others. So that's why I want to talk about it. Today, it's all about being and being with. I'm a firm believer that we live fully and freely in the present. It's the only thing that's real. We do not want to be stuck in the present. Now, how many of you heard we don't want to be stuck in the past, right? But I want to ask you to think about, we do not want to be stuck in the present. Equally, not who we are. And so we become stuck in the present when we fail to remember how much our present, our identity, our congregation has been shaped by change. We didn't get here by staying the same. And I want to paraphrase Beatrice Brutto, that wonderful philosopher, theologian, when she said this: Evolution is not background to our story. It is our story. Think about it. Evolution is not background. It is our story. And so we cannot ignore who we are and who we have been. And so our challenge today is to balance. It's always that B word, balance. Living in the present while remembering, and I'm going to use the word our heritage. I'm not going to use our history because I want us to think about our heritage. Remembering our heritage without being overly anxious and worried about the future so as to open ourselves to what is evolving today. Some of what is evolving is already here. It's here, waiting for us to notice. Attending to purpose, I believe, is one way of understanding and framing our individual and communal journey. And so you say, well, why focus on purpose? If you look at in your notes, some of what I'm saying is written right there. Purpose is a journey and a practice. Interesting phrasing. It's a journey. Why am I here? Why are we here? But it's also a practice. You can't just assume, we have to be here doing something with this journey. So what are we meant to be about as our life unfolds? Following a vision and commitment. Following a vision and commitment to that vision. And that would be true of lay men and women as well as our sisters and associates. There was a poem that I had sent. It just didn't quite get in your hands, but maybe we can get it to you. It's a poem by William Stafford. And the name of the poem is The Way It Is. And so the poets give us sometimes an insight, and so I'd like to share it with you. It's not too long, so I'll try to read it a little slowly. William Stafford, The Way It Is. He says this. There is a thread as in sewing, There is a thread you follow. It goes among the things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain sometimes about the thread. But it's hard for others to see. While you hold it, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt, die. You suffer. You get old. Nothing you can do to stop time's unfolding. Don't ever let go of the thread. So why focus on purpose? We're meant to be about, what are we meant to be about as our life unfolds? The vision is something that we have to keep in mind. So what is our vision? Of course, the major vision of our life is the gospel and the person of Jesus himself. And then we have a lens on that. Those of us who connect with this CSSJ charism, we have a lens. And one of the lenses that kind of we try to think about ourselves is this thing called our consensus statement, which is what you have with the piece of lace there. And so as I thought about how could I be helpful today? How could I help you, help me think about this time of transformation and change? And by the way, they're not the same. Change are the external. Transformation is an interior journey, both personal and communal. So, because purpose changes across our lifetime, purpose changes across anyone's lifetime. we find purpose in different areas of our life by what you cultivate, by what you reflect, and how you take action. So this is not a question of, oh, isn't that a nice thought? It's a question of reflecting deeply and then moving to some kind of action. I think it's about turning our efforts inward and meeting the needs of the world around us. It's never either or. And so I think the consensus statement invites us to purpose and challenges us both personally and communally to be, in the word, authentically unifying love, the unifying love, and the congregation of the great love of God. So one of the things I would invite you to look at when you look at the consensus statement, you might see a few words are more bold than others. They're darker. And so those are the words that I'm going to talk about. And I want to start with personal authenticity in the midst of uncertainty, chaos, and the whole question of letting go. So this is for you personally, whether you're a sister of St. Joseph, an associate, a layman or woman, it doesn't matter. You are called to be yourself, be authentic in the midst of uncertainty, chaos, and in this great letting go that we're all about. So I wanted to focus on the call in the consensus statement about sincere charity and humility. Now, those words were written a while ago. They come from early documents, and the consensus statement was written how many years ago? Long time. So for me, I took those words. I'm looking first at sincere charity. And I said to myself, well, what in the world does that mean today? What do we know today that maybe they didn't even know when they wrote this thing because our understanding evolves? So as a practicing psychologist and as a sister traveler with you, here's some thoughts about sincere charity. I think the first thing is that I am called and you are called to be a sincere person. Everybody see where we're at in the outline? Everybody find your place? Just keep looking because it's easier to follow along. It's at the top of one of the pages that says we're called to live in the present. Everybody got that? We're called to live in the present with who we are at this time and this place. And one of the ways we can be about that is to be a sincere person. Everybody see that? Being a sincere person. Okay. So what does being a sincere person mean when you come at things as I do from a psychological but a psycho-spiritual perspective? The very first thing is each of us is called to own our own life. Own our own life, past and present. I think one of the challenges of this time, at whatever age and stage you're at, it doesn't matter. You don't have to have a few gray hairs like I do. Huh? Whatever age and stage you're at, we are called to say, well, where have I been? Where am I now? What is that? What does that have to do with who I am? And I think we have to begin to let go of identifying with the past. I was a French teacher. I was, by the way. And I was in leadership. And I was the director of education at St. Luke's. And that's not who I am now. So what part of the past do you still identify with? And it no longer is true. And what are you hanging on to that for? You have an identity separate from that thing you did for a while. What you were in charge of, what you even know. I think I know how to do that. Well, you might not know how to do something right now. A significant part of our journey is to let go in order to let come. So what are you clinging to that doesn't give you any peace, doesn't give you any energy, and doesn't help the rest of us. This next one, number 2, it says crossroads in life offer a time for inner work. I'll speak to the sisters first, but it's true for many of us. I think we've learned that we're supposed to be here to serve others, and that any focus on self is self-centered, selfish, not who we're called to be. Well, guess what? That is not true. We now have an opportunity and an invitation to become better human beings every single day. To become a better human being. We're also called to learn new things. How many of you have learned some things about Zoom, right? And thank God we learned some new things. Otherwise, we wouldn't be even talking to each other at all, right? Adopt a new mindset. Now, I'm going to talk about mindset a little bit longer. How you see things. How you see things. Enhance some skills. Might be that iPad or your iPhone or your whatever. And then this last piece, which many of us, all of us to some degree, have had some emotional struggles in the past. Anybody ever been hurt? Any of us ever hurt someone else? Not because we wanted to, but have we hurt others? Mm-hmm. You know, we can't live in the present if our energy is sapped by old messages of regret, of hurt, of anger. We have an incredible opportunity by doing some inner work to forgive ourselves and others for the slights and hurts we have experienced or caused. We have a choice. If you don't hear anything else from me today, I hope you hear we have choices we can make that will anchor us in the present and open us to transformation and to what is coming, if we make them. And so we hear from David White right here. Our present crossroads, we might not arrive at something better unless we become better ourselves. Loving and loving well, which is what sincere charity is about loving ourselves, and sometimes that's the hardest person to love. It's about loving ourselves and others, always the and, not or. It's challenging, it's a daily choice. And we only get better at it with the help of others. Notice Paul in Thessalonians when he says, so encourage each other and build each other up. Nobody does this by themselves. Some of you know I work in 5 of the intercommunity novitiates in the U.S. I'm the sex lady. I'm the one who talks to them about sexuality. But one of the things I say to them over and over in the 3 and 4 and 5 days that I'm with them is this. I can't be me without you. And you can't be you without me. And so we do look at ourselves, honor our journey, accept, be open to letting go. Do inner work. And then, how do you want to use your time and talent for others? Never just about me. and my journey. It's about me and you and me and the people of God and me and the earth. This is a time for each one of us to choose to address the concerns and injustices that make sense to you. Everyone needs a way to express their unique self. We're not wiping out so we all look alike and think alike and all get passionate about the same things, although hopefully we get passionate about some things. But express our unique self and the gifts that we have for our own satisfaction. You know, I think religious life sometimes I think has taught us that life is hard. It shouldn't be satisfying. What? You know, Jesus came to invite us that we could be happy, not miserable servants. And so we have this gift and we have this unique sense of self and for our own satisfaction and help the world be a better place. We all need an inner focus and an outer focus to awake each day committed to something that matters. That's what we mean by purpose. And so I'm going to quote this maxim, and for the sisters, they know these, but you might not know it in this language. And the reason why, I'll tell you in a minute, but let me read it, maxim 39. Be of service to the world. The best service is the one that shares your gifts and gives you life. Now, these maxims that I'm using all throughout the handout were written by your students, you Brentwood CSJs. They're written by your students in some project, and I was given a copy a while ago. So listen to the wisdom of these young people as they translate our words. The best service is the one that shares your gifts and gives you life. And so, because service is never just about, for me, or sincerity is never just about being a sincere person, but it's being a sincere person with and for others. So I'd like to go to the top of the next page if you're following along. But I'd invite us to pray again. This short little thing, which, by the way, is from one of the hymns or music that we often sing, but you wouldn't want me to sing it. So here we go. You join me in saying, Spirit of love, come give us the mind of Jesus. Teach us. So what does being sincere with others look like? We're talking about sincere charity. Being sincere with. What does that mean? Well, I think the word presence and empathy are the two key words for today. Key words. Presence. Being present with and empathy. The comment I made there, it says, if we want to grow as human beings, we need to give something to those around us. And the greatest gift you have is to be present. Fully focused on the other as if there was nobody else in the world. Fully focused on it as if there were nobody else in the world. An empathic listening is not talking. It's listening. We got two of these ears to do it, you know. Empathic listening means hearing beyond the spoken word or the silence and paying attention to the nonverbal signs, the feelings that are underneath. A truly empathic listening is you understand how they feel, not just what they say. And so we want to pay attention to that. And what does it lead to? Connection and kindness and gentleness and compassion, a gentle compassion, and ultimately to communion, which is a word we're going to talk about a little bit later. want to talk about Jesus for a minute. And I want to talk about the woman with the hemorrhage. He was a significant listener to this woman with the hemorrhage, a woman, an outcast, a woman who was bleeding for 12 years. And so he stops. He says, "Who touched me?" Because he wanted to connect with this person. Now, the boys around him, or the people around him said, "What do you mean, who touched it? Look at this crowd." But he said, "Who touched me?" And once he discovered her, she didn't just state her name, thank him, and run home. But the story says she stood there and told him the whole truth. Imagine a woman in those times speaking about a long-term health issue that was really considered taboo. It was considered she was unclean. In the midst of a teeming crowd, he never belittled her for her kind of superstitious, I just touch them, it'll be kind of magic. And she grabbed the power without permission. This woman, who had previously been reluctant to speak, overflowed with words. What could have prompted this dramatic change except the focused attention of a listener who was not too preoccupied to hear the whole story? Jesus had a way of saying, "I'm here," in his words and in his manner that let people know he had nothing more important to do with his time than to be with them. Nothing more important to do with his time. I think in so doing, he gives us a glimpse of God, who's eager to know us, to know all the details. And he also offers us a model for transformative work that we can be about. So my question is, who do you listen to or not? Who do you listen to or not? And I'd like to think about these two words: perspective getting versus perspective taking. We're going to make that a little contrast. Perspective getting versus perspective taking. I think at times we assume we know who the other is or what's happening. So we take on a perspective. Oh, it's hard for her, or she's having a hard time adjusting. He's struggling with whatever. That's perspective taking. So what is perspective getting? It comes from sincerely asking for another to share their story and requires a gentle asking. Help me understand. And then the incredible art of empathic listening. So who do you need to hear from? And how can we learn to be a getter, not a taker? Lindsay Pollock, in her book, The Remix, the book is called The Remix: How to Lead and Succeed in a Multi-Generational Workplace. And you think, what in the world is she talking? What is that Lynn Levo talking about? What is that? She offers us an opportunity to think about multi-generational living today. Not just working, but living. This family of us, this Joseph family, the Spirit invites us to see that we have present generations living among us and around us, a unique generational mix of 5 different generations. Not 1, not 2, 5 different generations among us. We have a sacred window of opportunity for the present generations, oldest to youngest, youngest to oldest, to mix and mingle. For what? For the sake of community, for the sake of this great charism of the unifying will of God, for the sake of mission. And she offers a few little hints in her book that we might want to consider if we're ever going to embrace this incredible opportunity of generational differences and generational possibility. She said we have to stop generational shaming. They're built on stereotypes. Oh, the old, they're too tired. They don't have any energy. Or the young, well, they don't really understand community. Really? She said we have to assume the best intentions. Does that sound familiar? Remember one of those maxims? She said we need to be more transparent. We need to share more. We need to be more self-revealing. And we can't be judging what another person from another generation might say. She said we have to empathize, there's that word again, where we use this time to encounter differences in perspectives and worldviews and life choices. And then she says a funny one, not there are more, but the one I'm going to conclude with is she said, don't change what works. And what works is what's core to our identity, not these other things that we hang on to and say, this is what it means to be a sister of St. Joseph. No, it isn't. So what's our core identity or the roots? They are not the same. She's talking about now in the workplace, I think she said, roots are not the same as anchors. Anchors are things that happen for a time, they can weigh us down, and they no longer serve us. So what anchors are we called to let go of, and what roots are we called to hang on to with and for our younger generations and for the older generations? I'd like to talk about my recent experience with the young religious and associates, both men and women, who call themselves, listen to this language, the community of they call themselves the Joseph family of Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, it took all my courage to speak to them in Spanish. My Spanish is más o menos, but I prepared. These young women and men, many of them lay men and women, believe sincerely they are part of the Joseph family, spread throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. They identify with unifying love. Here's what one of them wrote to me after the fact. We believe in the charism. We want to motivate a different way of living the charism. Not imprisoned by structure or tradition, although tradition is important, but by our heritage, our true heritage, which is not hierarchical, but circular. It's about being a dancing community of God's love and all that comes with that. We have all been gifted with the same heritage. There were 100 of these young men and women, 20s, 30s, early 30s. Some of them committed, some of them vowed, and a bunch of them not. One last comment before we do our break in some small groups. my question I wrote there, you might think she gets stranger by the minute, but my question is, how is reading an invitation to self-discovery and purpose? How is reading? Reading connects us to people we will never know, and we can be inspired by how others live, relate, make the world better, and learn more about themselves, including in novels. You know, this isn't all, we're all going to read this heavy duty stuff. We're all going to be reading Ted Gugg, you know, although he's good. It hurts. So I want to share with you what happened to me when a friend recommended that I read the book Cast. The work Cast, written by Isabel Wilkerson. I began a journey with this book thinking, okay, I'm going to learn about caste in other people's lives. I'm going to learn about better understand what's happening in the U.S. with race, and I'm going to better understand what happened, what's it like in India. I had the privilege of being with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Lyon in India a few years ago. So I'll understand better caste in India and what happened in Nazi Germany, and of course here in the U.S. with color. And then there was what happened to me. When she talks about caste, she talks about gender, ethnicity, race, immigration, sexual orientation, age, even religion. She says caste is invisible, and that's what gives it power. One of the pillars, she talks about 8 pillars of belief, but the one that struck me is when I believe that I am inherently superior. She talks about in a caste system, everyone is captive. So what does this have to do with me? I have a brother who is a paraplegic as a result of a horrific accident 44 years ago. He was injured on working for New York State. It's been a long journey. He's maintained an incredible amount of independence. He's a tough nut. But I found more recently he had a foot amputation and he's had some incredible woundings and illness. And I found myself pushing back, you know, saying to him, come on, you know, as if I know better. So during my recent retreat, it came to me that, you know, it would probably be a good idea to stop fixing and knowing better, but rather to accompany. So I don't say a lot these days. I try to be empathic. Doesn't mean I don't say anything. But I try to listen more and help him speak his truth. And the more aware that I am, the more he feels respected, embraces his own authority, and I stop engaging in caste. And so we have one more maxim before we have our small group and break. And this one from 96. All your beauties and talents are just borrowed. Remember who owns them. Out of the mouths of our young people, huh? Out of the mouths of our young people. So what we'd like to do here, and we will take a break after this, so if you can hang in there for a few minutes, we'd invite you to some conversation. And can I advance this slide? Or
We did.
oh, okay. We have to go backwards.
Typically.
Oh. Well, We're going to have a couple of questions up here for you to consider. And questions are always prompts, and you'll talk about what you want to talk about. Am I right? Yeah. So here's really what we're saying is, I use this question as a somewhat generic question, but I think it's a good one. What was good for you to hear? You personally, what was good for you to hear? And then the second question is, what invites you to the more? And of course, in our consensus statement, look through is the more that we've always been about. So we want you to just take a moment of quiet and then try to respond to those questions or anything in your mind and heart with your sharing at the table for about 15 minutes. Okay, and then we're taking a break. I promise. You always know if you need to get up and move, you can do that. So, a couple minutes of quiet, and I'll invite the sharing. This is an opportunity to be more transparent, to speak the truth that is yours. There is no right answer. Yes, ma'am. By an ability to see and be attentive to God's dream. It does demand something different, just as it did to each of the prior generations of the women who came before us. I think our current understanding of the oneness of creation, called for by Pope Francis in Laudato Si, suggests that there must be new ways of being the congregation of the great love of God. New ways of witnessing to God's active, inclusive love. New ways of understanding the meaning and impact of reconciling, bringing back together, reconciliation. New ways of naming the dear neighbor. New ways of being in communion and embracing diversity. New ways for each of us of being about unifying love in our daily life. This is that new level of consciousness that Ted Dunn talks about and others, and it will enable us and will shape who we are now and will help us live our charism now and into the future, whatever that looks like. It's a timely reminder about mindset. An unconscious mindset can result in self-protecting questions and self-protecting behaviors that justify keeping things as they are. Let me say that again. An unconscious mindset. Well, we'll just see what happens today. Oh, we'll see. I wonder what those leadership people are doing. We'll just see. As if we have no choice. An unconscious mindset can result in self-protecting questions and behaviors that help justify keeping things as they are. To transform this time requires, demands that we reflect on purpose, what we just did individually and now collectively. Who are we called to be? What is authentic for us today? So I said in that, I think you now have this piece on your notes. Sometimes I'm talking around things. It says, our relational calling as Sisters of St. Joseph is a call to we. We cannot isolate ourselves, go in our room and shut the door, watch TV. Not come to a meeting because, oh, I can do it on Zoom. I'm not criticizing the women who are not here. I'm simply saying sometimes we choose comfort. Now, if you can't hear, I understand. That's a good reason to maybe put your headset on. I think this call to we, to move away from isolation and connection will give rise to greater relatedness, connection to what is happening within and among us. And here's the next piece. Our call to intersect with a diverse number of groups and movements. Our call to intersect with a diverse number of groups and movements. That includes, and among other things, an ongoing earth consciousness, or we won't have a life to live. But I'm going to go back to that one little phrase, intersecting with a diverse number of groups and movements. It can't just be me and my family, for those of you who may be married. It's me and my family. Not going to work. It can't be the Sisters of St. Joseph of Albany, and the heck with the rest of you. Not going to work. It can't be as a layman or a laywoman, well, I'll do my job and do this, and I hope the earth, we can preserve the earth. It won't work. So we have to kind of break out of these false parameters and say, who are the groups and movements that I need to connect with so that we can change the world? And here's the killer, or the clincher. It may not be a group we lead. We're not the only ones who know something. Think of what the book cast is inviting us to. It isn't that we're in charge, but we can be good members. We can lend wisdom, some fortitude and courage, even if we're not the leaders. The call to we has many facets, personally, communally, and it's going to require more depth and complexity in how we see things. And as we are held together, and what will hold us together, even with all this intersecting and mingling and commingling, our heritage will hold us together. Our heritage, living our charism and of unifying love, it will hold us together. Pope Francis, he did address this to women and men religious, but it's really a call to everybody. He says we need to be experts in communion. Now, the word communion is a really interesting word. It's been used, we've been using it in religious communities for several years. But psychology has embraced the word communion. And here's the understanding from psychology. It's to be one with without losing yourself. Isn't that a powerful understanding? To be one with without losing yourself. So can we intersect with persons of different faith? Can we intersect with people of different races? Can we intersect with people who don't agree with us? And are we going to be okay? Yeah. If we know who we are. And so this whole question of that experts in communion, Pope Francis is challenging us to be witnesses and architects of a different way of being one. Isn't that beautiful language? To be witnesses and architects of unity, of a different way of being one with. Not me and my little house, just with me and my family, or me with my community and the heck with the rest of you. Or the Sisters of St. Joseph of Brentwood are going to do their thing, and the Sisters of St. Joseph of Albany are going to do their thing. Really? In a broken world, in and for a broken world, we need to be witnesses and architects of oneness. The other piece that psychology is adding to the notion of communion, to be one with without losing oneself, to be one with difference or diversity. That is one of the biggest challenges of our day. Can we be one and not look and think exactly alike? Can we be one with difference? It takes profound understanding of oneself and the ability to know you won't lose yourself when you're in relationship with people who see it differently. Here's another way of phrasing the invitation of today for us communally and for others. Can we create alternate spaces? Let me say that again. Can we create alternate spaces where the gospel approach of self-giving, connection, embracing differences, helping and loving one another can thrive? Spaces for the future will look different than the spaces of today. What alternate spaces are we being asked to help create? Think about that young group of 100 men and women in their 20s and 30s in Central and South America who say, we're the family of Joseph. And the congregations who have members there, like mine and others, we're supporting their part of the family of Joseph. Alternate spaces. I think we have a particular challenge and invitation to understand today. This is a key area. It's one that's dear to my heart. That understand that communion involves embracing diversity. We got to figure out how to be in relationship with difference, and that's at every level. And you see how it's failing in our own government and the church. Diversity includes a rich mix of differences that includes all the dimensions that make a person one of a kind, including ethnicity, race, age, style, gender identity, beliefs, sexual orientation, and more. I often say to the novices, do you think God was on vacation when these diverse aspects of being human came into being? You think they slipped in the back door? Or is a better question, what is God inviting us to with this amount of diversity that's right here in front of us? Diversity is about embracing that psychological, physical, and social differences occur among us. Look at this room. We don't all look alike. We don't think alike. We have different issues. Some of us get a little more hip action than others. And then there's this piece. Related to an awareness of diversity is the significance of inclusion. What do we mean by inclusion? It's directly related to the alternate space. Listen to this. Inclusion is when a person feels valued, connected, and has a sense of belonging. Valued, connected, and senses they belong. We can exclude right here. So diversity is inviting inclusion. It's an important realization we now have that everyone thrives in an environment, in that alternate space where worth is recognized. Worth is recognized, and individuals can be safe and express who they are authentically. So safety. That includes in community. Can a sister stand up and say, I don't agree? Not to be belligerent, but to express, how she sees it. And be safe. Inclusion helps us know we belong to something bigger. Not just this small little thing, something bigger. And one last thing in relationship to diversity. That's why this embracing diversity as part of our call to communion is so critical, because related to diversity and inclusion is equity. And what does equity do? It levels the playing field. It guarantees fairness, access, and opportunity, and promotes this justice and impartiality that Jesus came to invite us, encourage us to. So can you understand why communion now becomes, and communion with the being one without losing yourself, that's so critical. And it's also embracing diversity, because we need to be also inclusive and fair. I'm working with LCWR, and we've been working on sexual diversity. It's been a journey to try to help all LCWR leadership, at least, understand what's happening in the regard to sexual diversity. A lot of our sisters are fine with orientation. This person's gay or lesbian, The next big presentation we're doing is on gender identity. And we are doing in that, working with LCWR, we're not perspective taking. It's going to be perspective getting. We're having 2 of our transgender brothers and sisters come and speak about their journey. We can't just assume we know. No. I'd like to talk about a mindset about our heritage. We're continuing along on the handout if you're watching. I think it's the top of the next page. I think an understanding of heritage will help us to let go and let come. When we talk about history, we talk about, well, we were there, we did this, and we lived in that house and our provincial house and all of that. I think we do that fairly easily. But heritage is the way of living a community has inherited, and that we're called to pass it on. It's a gift that needs to keep being given. Heritage gives us connection to a founding vision, values, beliefs, and customs, which give us a sense of identity, unity, and belonging. It's what will hold us together when everything else is up for grabs. That's true in a family. What holds us together, even when everything else seems chaotic, and helps us identify with one another and reminds us that we are a complex group, and there's a lot of diversity here, and we still can be one. I think everyone's challenge is to accompany one another, as it says there, as our life evolves. So we're all responsible for our heritage. Heritage has tangible aspects and intangible aspects. This was really helpful for me when I did a little exploring of heritage. The tangible aspects, buildings, historic places, ministries, we've always had girls' academies, we've always had this, we always do this. Those are tangible aspects. I didn't say they weren't important. And I didn't say we're going to just dismiss them, say, oh, well. And for those of you who've spent your life in a tangible expression, for those of you who've spent your life in one of those schools that you have sweated blood and tears to help stay open, the loss for you is greater than the loss for someone else who did not spend their blood and tears there. You understand? That doesn't mean when a younger person or person who's entered later says, if we have to let go of the schools, we let them go. It doesn't mean they're unfeeling or they don't care. It's just they don't have the connection. And if I'm the younger person, I need to realize there's a different connection and to be more sensitive. And if I'm a person who spent my blood and tears there, to recognize that's a tremendous loss as you begin to let it go, if that's what we're called to. I'm just using that as an example, right? I don't know your story. Tangible aspects, intangible, vision, tradition, values, and social practices. For us, I think we have neglected too much to our not being helpful, sharing of the heart and sharing the state of the house. They still matter and they can help us because what are they inviting us to? More connection, more transparency, more self-disclosure, more relying on one another, and seeing beyond my little world today to see what's the world of the need around us. I think those practices need to be much more a part of our life. Notice it says these intangible aspects require efforts to protect and keep them alive through an evolving understanding of the founding vision and through creativity. I'm not too sure I would have thought about the family of Joseph spread throughout Latin and South America without, I'm not sure I would have thought that up, but boy, they're here. So we have to accompany one another, understand we come at things a little bit from different places. Can we be sensitive, respectful? Can we be empathic? There's the word again. I think offering hospitality, the alternate spaces where all are welcome. You've done that. You've done that with Providence, it doesn't mean you've never done it. The question now is, what does it look like today? What is every one of us? How are we offering hospitality, which is really central to this unifying love? And look at this quote by Henry Now. The paradox of hospitality is that it wants to create emptiness. Not a fearful emptiness, but a friendly emptiness where strangers can enter and discover who they are and they can be free. Wow. Wow. We can help make that happen. Maybe it's not, I think of the idea, but can we support you in that? And then the last piece here is when I talk about trusting communal discernment processes and in one another's goodness as choices unfold. I work with a lot of women leaders who are in LCWR, and I work in the collaborative leadership group. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Being in leadership today is no piece of cake. No matter where the leadership is, in a corporation, in the U.S. government, in our state government, as you see, we now have a new woman governor. So I think we have to kind of cut them a little slack. I didn't say anything they do is okay. I'm simply saying cutting a little slack in here. And especially when they invite us to a process that we have no idea what the outcome is. Let me say a couple of things that I have found to be true in my walking with women religious in particular, but it's true of everybody. There's a organizational specialist. He's not a religious. His name is Jeff Conklin. And he says this: we're living with wicked issues, questions, and challenges. And he uses the word wicked to shake us up with it. He could have said complex or difficult, and he's saying wicked. And when he talks about wicked, he means this: they're difficult to define. So you say, we're asking, what are we going to do with our provincial house? Do you think that's easy to even ask the question? And then to have all we don't agree among us. We have a lot of diversity, as you do. So there's diversity on what is the question. If we get agreement on what is the question, then the thing is, what do we understand by the question? I understand it means this. You understand it means that. And then it says, can we come to an agreement about anything? And if we think diversity is outside, just try asking some of these questions about the next steps for your own community, or your own family. Should we move? Should the husband take a new job? There are no right answers. If you don't hear anything else, hear that. There's only those that we can work out together. That means culturally, societally, in the church, in our own communities, in our own family. There are no right answers. Get rid of that mindset. Are some answers or some things better than others? You bet your life. Do we want to get those that are a little bit better and start moving towards it? Yeah, sure we do. But we're only going to get there by talking to each other and helping each other figure out what's better, because there are no right answers. Should we do this or should we do that? And that is, it says, then if we can work out together, then we see what happens next and learn from our efforts. Some of what we do will work. We'll get some benefit of them. They say, God, that didn't work at all. And I always love it when somebody in the community says, what were they thinking? You think they wanted to make not the best choice? Come on. Are we going to trust each other or not? Here's the last piece I would add here. It does require choosing, learning, choosing again, making adjustments. It requires vulnerable truth-telling, which is the basis of trust. If we're not vulnerable in our truth-telling, we're never going to know where the other person's coming from or where the leadership is coming from. So it requires, that is a sign of strength. That is not a sign of weakness. When we say, this is as much as we know, we're not sure about this, but we think this is a good way to go, what about it? Vulnerable truth. And then here's the last piece I would offer. Not getting bogged down with how to. We have to be willing to take a leap and then figure out how to. Albany, if you don't know, Albany and Peru have decided we're going to end our province structure, part of Carondelet, and we're going to connect together with the general leadership, which we've already been connected to, so it's kind of a false craziness, but anyway, we're doing it. And sometimes in our conversations, people say, well, how are we going to do that? We said we can spend the next 2 years doing all the how-tos that may never come to be, or we can trust one another that this is the right move, given all the other things we've looked at, demographics, our younger women, all of the things we need to do to move forward. We're going to do it. Guess what? It's happening. Nobody's died. We're trusting each other. We're talking to each other. Some people get a little nervous. It's okay. There's a wonderful book called The Answer to How is Yes. You might want to consider it. Yeah. It's from the folks at Harvard who talk about how do we get through impasses. How do we, you can't know all the details. Sisters, we cannot know all the pieces. But if we're directed by the vision, then we'll deal with the pieces. Look at that last maxim. Always keep in mind the goal of creating a social order of love, and don't get lost in the details. That's from one of your students. So if we could pray together in the spirit of love, come give us the mind of Jesus. Teach us. I think the last thing I'd like to talk about is peace and joy. Peace is a choice, resulting from how I live, how you live. I'd like to talk about letting go of worry. Worry is an act of the imagination. Do you know that? Because what you're doing is you're saying, the worst possible thing's going to happen. That's what worry is about. It's a self-created state of needless anxiety and fear. And still most of us worry, don't we? We worry because we feel like we're not in control. Well, guess what? We're not. We just think about it. We're not in control of all of these pieces, so make peace with that. You might worry, you might worry about me driving home today. I'm going to drive back home. You say, oh, I hope she gets there, and there's no guarantee that she'll have to pay. Maybe she'll get caught in traffic, and you're all worried about it. I know you would. Worry is your attempt to feel useful and in control. But it does nothing to change the outcome. If I get caught in traffic, all your worry doesn't get me out of it. And what it does, and this is the piece we have to understand, there is a negative impact of worry. It impacts your body, your mind, and your spirit. So we have to catch ourselves. And if you have a habit of worrying, and some of us do, you got to catch ourselves before we get into a full-blown snip. The good news is there is a way to transform this, and that is notice, stop, distract yourself, not worry, but also you can use your imagination in a better way. You can use your imagination in this way, the best possible result that could happen. And so you could say, Lynn, it's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, she's going to have a great trip home. She hits a little traffic, no big deal. Second aspect about peace, being true to yourself. Stop pretending. Be yourself. It takes a lot of energy trying to be someone else. Third one takes care of your physical self. You really, sisters, at a time that is highly anxious, chaotic, without a lot of surety, you need to know how to soothe yourself. Soothe is the word. Soothe meaning how to relax some, how to distract yourself. These are good techniques. I'm not saying deny reality. I'm simply saying don't get hooked into all of the, then what's going to happen? Then, we got to soothe, calm it down a bit. The pandemic is teaching us a lot about poor choices in coping with anxiety and uncertainty. And here's one of the choices that I think we can fall into. Numbing ourselves with poor food choices. Excess sugar, carbs, salt, and fats are killing us. In addition, the use of TV, computers, games, and I want to talk about time fillers. Time fillers that appear harmless and may be numbing us to what is real. It's so easy to watch the game shows night after night after night and not talk one word to the people sitting in the room with you. These are time fillers which appear harmless and maybe not so harmless. Now, if they are relaxing and you're still talking all of that, so we don't want to be numb, because if you're numb, you can't be happy. And finally, our last couple of thoughts here, talking to God about everything, especially how you feel. I worked at St. Luke's, the treatment center for priests and religious, and one of the things we learned is that many of the men and women who were in treatment had no idea that you should talk to God, or you could talk to God about how you feel. That you're angry, you're frustrated, you're disappointed, you're happy, you're joyful. Our ability to trust that we can say to God anything, and our ability to trust in God's wisdom depends greatly on the strength of our connection and our personal prayer life with this gracious, benevolent God who's just dying to hear from us. Good deeds, remember those random acts of kindness, of course, so we don't get stuck and we do bring a sense of usefulness and purpose. And those are the kind that nobody knows about. We pick up this thing, you do that, you fix that. Trust one another as life evolves. Trust is a big issue for us today. And so look at that beautiful maxim by one of our students there. Interpret all things from the best possible point of view. The universe will take care of it. Will return the favor. And finally, a couple of words on joy. And we're getting close to the end time here. But, I think living with doom and gloom and worry wears us out. It wears us out. Even as you heard me talk about my brother, sometimes, he's pretty down in the dumps because he's got so much going on. So I try to I'm not denying those feelings, but I try to inject something else about the world that we live in. Like right now, coming up this afternoon, the New York Giants will be playing. Our team. These my teams, my brother's team. So I said to him, the Giants are playing. What do you think? So we do a little bit of nudging away from the pain that he has and the suffering. There's no doubt about it that he has suffered more than any human being that I know. So, but doom and gloom and worry, they weigh me down. So I try to add something without denying, without him saying that. We say, that's not so bad. You say, yeah, that's pretty tough. And last week I went up and I said, what are we cooking? He looked at me, what? And he's a gourmet cook. He really is good. I said, look, I'm here. What are we cooking? I'm willing to take some direction. And so we cooked together. Small, amazing spirits, not denying. And so I would encourage you, and I gave you the article I wrote a few years ago. It's the last 2 pages or the last page of the handout where it says joy requires tending. And my suggestions are clear. I'm only going to talk about 2 of them. And one of them is surrendering to what is. I think sometimes we think surrender means giving up. And what I want to suggest here, surrender means accepting our circumstances, feelings, problems, work, relationships. It's the only way we're going to be joyful. And notice what it says. It does not mean resignation. There's nothing I can do here. Sisters, as soon as you buy into there's nothing I can do, I have no choices. You cannot be joyful. You cannot be joyful. You do have a choice. The other one I would talk about is practicing gratitude. And you can read the article. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Sisters, even, we have a lot. And our brothers and sisters who are listening are associates. We have a lot. We can get bogged down in what we don't have. But we have a lot of. Notice it says, you do not deny the painful realities of illness, financial difficulties, strained relationships, or work that is not meaningful. No, we're not denying any of that. But we do take the notice what is, not just what is not. And so what I suggest here is doing a little gratitude journal. Before I go to bed at night, before I go to sleep, I'm in bed and I do what am I grateful for today? Even if it's one day. we send into the great universe around us, we send in gratitude, not anger, not disappointment. The rest of them you can read, I gave it to you on purpose because I knew we were going to be tight on time. So look at that maxim 69. Stay in the present moment and the future will take care of itself. The future is right here. And remember when we talked about not getting stuck in the present, we often think about not getting stuck in the past, but we can get stuck right here. So we're going to pause, and because we said we would end at 3:30, and we will keep that promise because I think people have plans or I'm just going to ask you to stop for a minute and just ask yourself, what's one thing that you heard, even in the conversation among you, may not be something I said. What's one thing you heard that you take with you? What's one thing that you heard that you take with you? And I would like to hear some of those so you can hear from each other. Our time is a little tight. And here's another way to answer that question. How does this conversation today help you to think about transformation and living in the present, which is all that matters, the only thing that's real? Both of those things. Transformation is upon us, and so is living in the present. Now, the introverts among you are saying, give me a month. Those of you who are more extroverted, you might have it on the tip of your tongue. So we'll hear from anyone, introvert or extrovert, anyone who'd say, what about today? Just for you and today, what about it?
The piece about worry.
The piece about worry, yeah. It goes no place. And yet, boy, aren't we great at it? Yeah, and it hurts. It's not without impact. Yeah, right. Thanks. Worry. Good point. Yes.
What really struck me is getting perspective. That just absolutely struck me. Thank you.
It did me too, which is yeah, getting versus taking. Will you be a getter, not a taker?
I think when we talk about heritage, the whole idea that the charism is what's going to hold us together. So.
Yeah, right. What's the most important part of our heritage? It's that charism that calls us and others.
I like the two words that you use, roots and anchors.
Mm-hmm.
I think many of us anchor ourselves where we know that roots grow, move around in a plant, in the ground, and that's what keeps the upper part alive.
I think the term living in the present, owning the fact that I need to live in the present, not in the past, and not jump to the future. And the present we take care of. The future, the past helps us to get to where we are now. But things have to be let go.
The statement that you said, and keep it going. A significant part of our journey is to let go and let come.
Trust in the process. Yeah. Whatever the process is. If it's family process, if it's a communal process, if it's, yeah, it doesn't mean we don't pay attention to the elements, but trusting and that together we'll be able to figure this out.
I think you're highlighting purpose and the focus that we have on choices as pathways to a future and to live the present.
The point that we don't always know what the question is. So how can we really understand what we're working toward? But that there are no right answers, but we learn from our efforts.
The aspect of listening and who are we listening to today. We had a beautiful prayer service here yesterday. One of our Shinnecock sisters, the indigenous, reminded us over and over again of the word listening and who are we listening to. So I think, and just that reminder to the diversity.
Well, it seems like there was some listening going on here. I wanted to share just this quote from her. Just struck me so deeply in the last week or so. So he says about himself. So I go about trying to walk on the waters of great depth. Worse than ever before, better than ever before. It's always painful. And reassuring when he, notice, when he whom I am not, or we can say, when she who I am not is visibly destroyed by the hand of God, in order that the simplicity in the depths of me, which is really love, may be set free to serve God in peace. We have this wonderful quote from Hosea. The Holy One has tended us from our youth, from those very beginnings way back in 16. Was our healer when we didn't even know it, is present with us still, and will not let trials and tribulations consume us. And then finally, from one of our indigenous elders, we hold this day yours to make. Amen. Thanks for I enjoyed being with you. Thank you.
I know all of you offer Lynn with me our heartfelt gratitude for this afternoon, for calling us, for engaging us, for reflecting with us, to find pathways to transformation, to claim our vulnerability so that we may live in communion with empathetic listening, with perspective getting, not taking, so that we may be this unifying love in the world. Thank you for your presence today. Thank you, really. May we live it. Thank you again for your presence. Blessings on your journey.
Thank you, Jill.
And all of our tech team, all the behind the scenes, Josh and Matt, We also thank all those who virtually joined us. I know that, just to say this, we're living out of this pandemic in uncertain times, and we are into the world of hybrid. And so as we make our way together with one another, being sensitive to all the different kinds of devices, we continue to get better and refine our way. So again, thank you for the patience for those who are virtually joining us, and again, for those who are with us in person. Blessings to all. Thank you.